Okay, so I'm going to show you a case that I wasn't planning to show you, but it kind of brings together all the things that we were talking about earlier. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about monitoring the cerebrovascular circulation and show you some TCD basics. So okay, so here's a case, and this is a patient who needed an LVAD. And I was asked again, hey, this guy too sick for a sternotomy. Is there a minimally invasive way of doing this? Okay, and so this is a CAT scan. Okay, this is just any old CAT scan. On the CAT scan is you. If you change the windowing of it, you can see the patient. You can see their clothes. You can see leads that are on them. You can see scars on them. And so think of this now as being your view of the patient lying on this table. You're used to seeing these cross-sectional pictures. It's just the way this is presented. If we had a scan of my face, you'd have me kind of sitting up there, but you never present the data like that. And so one of the things that we're interested in is how do you take the surgeon's view? So we can see the clavicles. I mean, this is not even set up to do it. Like, it can be much, much better than what you're looking at. But this is the so-called surface rendered CT. And the reason that this is important, it's not what was done in this case, but as you're lying on the table, and we make this picture as that same CAT scan that we took a month ago. If we take an optical scanner, optical scanners are dirt cheap, and we put it on an iPad and we scan you, we can create this picture for almost nothing. Now we can fuse these images together, and we can do it with the patient on the table. And now, once we've got the images fused, we can kind of show you on that table that same kind of viewing system that we were looking at. And so that's how we move. We can't use the $3 million imaging system just to plan a surgical incision. But if the patient's got a CAT scan, we need a way, and the neurosurgeons do this every day. If you walk into a neurosurgery operating room, now they got an advantage. They put bolts in your head so they can't move. But the Medtronic makes this, it looks like ET. It's got this arm on it and it looks like eyes coming off the top, and they scan their head. And then they fuse these images together, and they plan how they're going to navigate inside your head based upon that. And a lot of these things have not made the leap into the cardiovascular. It's amazing how siloed we are around the hospital. So walk in a neurosurgery operating room and you'll see this being utilized. We're trying to work on it. How do we use this? Okay. So the question was, they're going to put in a hardware device, and the question was, we really need to get this incision in the right place. We really need to have this thing directed towards the mitral valve. Can you guys help us? So we went and run around, found a hardware, and we brought it up here, and we made a CAT scan of the device. Okay, so this is the device. This is a CT scan of the device. It's a DICOM data set of the hardware. So then we go back. So the clinical problem, is we need to be able to collaborate. We need to be able to test these concepts really of how we're going to do this. So here's our patient, and again, these are just different views really off the CAT scan, basically and now we need to be able to see, where his. So what we did is, you can window it to the point that we can see the mitral valve. Remember, we're drawing all these images around the aortic annulus. That's the mitral annulus. Okay. So on the CT scan, we're planning where would be the right position of putting this in the apex so that it was directed towards the mitral. And then beyond that, where does the skin incision need to take place in order to be able to execute, on the planned operation? So here's the device. But that device is not in the patient. That device is here in a CAT scan. We've taken the image, we've merged these two things together, and now we can play what if. What if we position it here? That yellow line will pop up, will show you the mitral valve, and we can plan where we're going to access the heart in order to be able to put this thing in. You can do the same thing with the aorta in terms of sewing in, the graft. And so here you can see it's being modeled in this volumetric image of here's where this thing would sit. Here's how we would do this. And here's what it would look like. So we then go into the hybrid room. And so this is all virtual. Mitral valve, here's where we'd position it. This is access. You can see how it emerges, how that same path emerges just from the skin. And then we're going to plan it, based upon what the access to the skin is. And so this is how we're going to do the operation. There's no incision. We're looking at the device virtually and plan it. Then we're going to plan the operation basically off that. Here's the operation, using these image guidance techniques that I've talked about. This is done with a beating heart. And then we tunnel basically around and sewed it onto the aorta through a little thoracotomy incision. LVAD patient, too sick for a sternotomy according to the transplant surgeon. This is how the procedure was done, planned and executed. This is him post-op day 1, sitting up, chatting to us about how well he's doing. So there are huge advantages in planning these operations to be able to minimize the magnitude of the intervention. Okay? Any questions about this? Most of them I probably can't answer. All right. Now we're going to pick up on what we talked about earlier. And this is, and again, I didn't learn how to do transcranial Doppler. I've had to learn these tools that we can add in to supplement how we take care of patients. And Zolt is going to show you some cases, okay? Transcranial Doppler. And one of the things that happens when you get experts, we've written basically what practice standards for this. And so think of this thing as the stethoscope of the brain, okay? What it does is a little probe. Most people have what are called temporal windows. The bone in this area is thin enough you can fire an ultrasound beam down into the brain, and you can look at flow. I'll show you which arteries you're looking at. Some people have thick heads and may not have.
Mostly women.
I
heard from Dr. Karami.
Yeah, may not be able to do that, and so most times it's the so-called temporal window, looks at middle cerebral artery. There's a bunch of other things. I wouldn't even worry about that really at the moment. Just focus basically on the easy part of it. And so the reason I'm explaining this is because I don't understand it. When Zoe explains it, whoa, he knows way too much about it. He's probably one of the world's authorities in doing this. So again, here's the thin head, the thin bone. You put an ultrasound on there, and it fires an ultrasound beam across that line, okay? And you can get it on the other side of the head. Now, God designed the cerebral circulation for transcranial Doppler. He was a forward-thinking kind of guy to make it easy to do that. Because the advantage is it's all axial in this situation, all in one line. So when you put ultrasound in here, you can adjust the depth of the beam. So you can say at 5 to 6 centimeters, tell me what the flow pattern looks like, and it will show you what the flow pattern is in the middle cerebral artery on that side, and it will tell you that that's middle cerebral artery flow. Now remember, what happens is that as blood comes up the carotid artery, it splits into a T. T's for Texas. Just remember that. God's a very smart guy. Not L for Louisiana, T for Texas is basically what's up there. And if you look at both sides, it's TT. So the guys from Texas Tech really love that. We think he was a Raider too, in addition to all of that stuff. So bottom line is, carotid comes up and it divides into two arteries in a T shape, and that T is middle cerebral artery flowing towards the surface of your brain. Anterior cerebral artery flowing towards the middle of your brain. So when you turn Doppler on, whether it's echo, peripheral ultrasound, blood coming towards the probe is red. Just by convention, it's depicted red. Blood flowing away from the probe is showing up as blue. Okay? In theory, the middle cerebral artery should be coming towards your probe, it should be red. In theory, blood flowing away from your probe as in the anterior cerebral artery should be blue. Okay? But if the internal carotid artery is occluded on the left side, blood will come up the opposite side, will flow to the surface of the brain. That's away from the probe, should be red. Should be coming towards the probe. This reverses. So now flow comes all the way over here, so that will turn red. That's how you know if you're only perfusing one carotid artery whether you're flowing both sides of your brain or not. And the other nice thing about, where we use, so for example, we do carotid endarterectomies. We use this, every carotid intervention, every arch intervention, we're doing transcranial Doppler monitoring. And we published doing thoracic endografts because it allows you to look at what is happening in the different parts of the procedure as I am manipulating it. Real time, immediate feedback. So for example, and Joel will show you some examples of this. If I'm doing a carotid endarterectomy, what I care about is the action that's going on upstream here. Let's say I'm doing carotid endarterectomy on this side. And Zolt's got his probe on there, and he tells me that the flow velocity, so what you do here is, this is the surface of the head, this is the midline, right there. So that is the ipsilateral anterior cerebral. This is the ipsilateral middle cerebral. Red is the contralateral anterior cerebral, okay? To get basically the waveform, the velocity waveform, you dial down, where you want to see the velocity waveform. So here, he's basically hitting probably right at the end of the internal carotid artery. This shows you what the waveform is at that depth. 60 centimeters correlate, the depth correlates with the different parts of the brain. And so if we're doing a carotid, procedure, doesn't matter what the procedure is. Let's say we're going to be doing an innominate bypass, for example. Then, and we clamp the innominate, he will tell me that the flow velocity on the right side has dropped. So we start off, let's say we're looking at flow velocity here, 100 centimeters a second. You clamp it, it drops. If it doesn't drop, you're looking at the wrong artery inside the head. One of the confusing things you sometimes get is the posterior communicating artery. So it tells you that we're monitoring the right artery, and he tells me what that is. If this stays above 50% baseline, you're good to go. You don't need to do anything to augment the flow up there. Typically what will happen is it will drop to about 50% baseline, then it'll come back up to about 80% baseline. And you're pretty good at that point in time. You know you're good at that point in time. Don't need to basically perfuse that, don't need to put a shunt in it, don't need to do any of this particular thing, okay? And so it helps. So one of the things I'm talking about is, wouldn't it be nice to know what your pre-pump flow velocities are in your middle cerebral artery? I would like you to keep me around there. I will handle 80%. I may be able to tolerate 50%. I don't want to have my cerebral hemisphere flowing at 40% of the rate that I started at. So, and we don't know the answer to this. I mean, one of the questions could be, do we establish what the baseline velocities are, come up with a mean velocity and say, hey, you should be perfusing my brain to whatever it should be. I don't really know what those numbers actually are. So think of this as telling you, everybody gets completely focused on embolization. I'm not even mentioned embolization yet. Take it off the table. Think of it as it tells you baseline flow and flow direction. That is incredibly valuable in its own right, if nothing else. I can tell you that patient who had the type A dissection, who was being perfused, probably had no flow intraoperatively, was not perfusing their head, and I could have told that surgeon that immediately. I could have told the perfusion that immediately. And one of the questions is, what can you do about it? Well, you're damn well going to do something about it. If you're not perfusing your head, you better figure it out, because I'll guarantee you ain't going to waken up at the end of that case. Yep.
The perfusionist could have told him that had we been monitoring.
Had you been monitoring? Well, they were doing what?
Instead
TCD, you mean?
Somebody telling the surgeon and somebody telling the perfusionist, maybe the perfusionist could have told the
Sure.
surgeon.
Oh, sure. Again, I'm coming to the point that I think you exist to perfuse my brain. I don't really give a damn about my legs. Although maybe, that's probably optimal. I worry a little bit about my kidneys. I only got 3 or 4 minutes of brain, and I would really like to know minute to minute what's going on in my head when I'm on cardiopulmonary bypass. Okay, and then we'll get to the embolization part basically a little bit down the line. Forget that at the moment. Is it of value to know that you're perfusing the brain? This is kind of that lawyer question again. Is it better to know you're perfusing the brain or not know you're perfusing the brain? All right, so, and if we knew what the baseline was, do you think that would be helpful in trying to, that's a different kind of question actually. That may not be the right question. So we can look at this, okay? Now and again, this case, another type A dissection, complex thing. We're going to have to do a carotid subclavian, but the patient had a common carotid trunk. We were going to lose both carotids at some point in time in the reconstruction. probably not good. So we kind of figured we could do a subclavian to carotid bypass while we disconnected the carotids, so that we would perfuse through the subclavian, up through the carotid subclavian bypass, into the carotid, into the head. Well, what about the right hemisphere? So the TCDs are on both hemispheres, okay? We clamp the left carotid because we're going to do a bypass to it. And Zoll says, so I'm now clamped carotid down here. He said, perfect. This reverses, becomes red. We're monitoring flow up here. It's dropped a little bit. You got an intact circle of bolus. We're perfusing great, both hemispheres. That was the good part of this case. That was probably the only good part of the whole case, to be completely honest with you. Because there, from that point on, went a hell in a handbasket. But it was also kind of interesting because, so we now got the bypass in. This patient needed to be debranched. And we clamped the right carotid when we're inside the chest to see if we could bypass it. And he goes, perfect. Flow is going across here. Everything is red on this side. Everything's blue, actually. It's flowing away from the probe, but you're perfusing the brain. Flow velocity drops, comes back up to about 70-80% baseline. Golden. Take the clamp off. Is the clamp off? Said, the clamp's off. And he goes, are you sure? Yeah, I'm looking at it. So then come back. So I told John he gave me a real pain in the ass when he's telling you things like this, because we don't believe him. The carotid had dissected from the clamp. The patient basically has an aortopathy, and the clamp had dissected the carotid, and he told us there was a problem with the carotid aorta. That was a minor problem compared to clamp and the aorta, I can tell you. That was, this was a bad day, but the ability to see what's going on inside your head as these things are going on I think is enormously important, and something I think you guys basically are better suited than anybody. So that's the ultrasound beam comes all the way across here. And so, again, middle cerebral artery, there's a depth of range, I think it's like 5 to 7.5 centimeters. Depth for the anterior cerebral, depth when you cross the midline. You will see these things. But the most important thing is you put two probes on each side, you can see both hemispheres. And you can monitor what's going on in both hemispheres, and you know where you're perfusing or not. And if you have bubbles, you will see this. And you will hear it, yes. Yeah, so, I mean, that's kind of how this thing works. And so not everybody has a window. 10 to 15% of people don't have a window. That's a problem, actually. But in the people who have a window, I think this is an incredibly valuable tool. Now let's talk about embolization. So, who wants the case? You want a case? You got a case. Okay, you're doing the aortic valve. Everything goes fine until the patient wakes up the next day and they're hemiplegic. You got to fix them. This is not. We're reported nationally. We're allowed a 3 to 4% stroke rate. We're now a little bit over that. Well, what happened? Why did this patient have a stroke? No idea? First of all, we do this. Wants to be the anesthesiologist, there wants to be the surgeon, it's like somehow or other the cardiologist managed to screw me over in the operating room. Pardon? CT scan shows big left cerebral infarction. Maybe. Pardon? This is not a trick question. Give me the list. What's the list?
Low perfusion?
May not be perfusing. There's one thing. This is the thing I'll tell you right off the bat if there's no perfusion. Okay, so it may not be perfusing it. Maybe a dissection. Maybe the carotid is dissected. Who knows basically what it is? Maybe a million reasons. It could be emboli. It could be basically clamping. It could be putting the cannulas in. It could be unclamping. It could be basically clotting the valve. It could be a million different things. Fix it. Tell me how you're going to fix it. Can you fix it, Joe?
Can't necessarily fix it, but you can certainly identify where it came from where there might have been an issue in any one particular case. And I think that if you are doing the same thing the same way all of the time, and every time you do the same thing the same way all of the time, you have something that is picked up by the device, maybe not do the same thing the same way every time.
Okay. So the point of me asking you is, I don't think you've got a clue. I don't think you have any idea. This patient's waking up, have a stroke, and we have this discussion. It could be this, could be this, could be this, could be this, could be this. At the end of the day, and you try to fix something, and you can't because you have no idea when it actually happened. Okay, so the value of TCD, to me, this is what we published, was on thoracic endograft. I need to know what is hitting here when you put the guy on pump, when the surgeon puts the cannula in, when the surgeon puts the clamp on. You can't figure this out after the fact. You have to have real-time monitoring and know what is happening up in the head as you're manipulating things down in the aortic arch and the heart, whenever it is. Now, it's not absolute, okay? It's not absolute. But it's a hell of a lot more absolute than what you're telling me at the moment. I mean, I'm at least in the game of trying to guess what I got to fix. I mean, maybe it's the valve problem. Maybe it's the perfusionist problem. Maybe the surgeon's basically an idiot. You know, there are all of these things you can't your stroke rate's not that high. We're going to come to that. So it's when you're trying to get it down from 4% to 2%, very hard. I mean, you have to have some way of trying to figure out when it actually happened because you can't fix everything after the fact. And so the advantage of TCD is it shows you real time when stuff. Can't really distinguish the gas basically from the particulate when it is hitting here. And we record these things synchronously. So even after the fact, we can go back and look at the surgeon did this and all the stuff hit there. Now, the criticism of TCD is it's too sensitive, okay? Okay? It tells me stuff that is irrelevant. That's the big criticism. Every surgeon you talk to is going to say this to you, okay? So here's the defense, okay? We accept it probably shows you more than you really want to hear. It's very sensitive. This will detect down to 4 micron pieces that are going up there, okay? Some of that may not be clinically relevant. So let's take it to the point now where the surgeon puts the cross clamp on. There's no embolization. We've criticized it because it's too sensitive. You've done the procedure that is probably most likely associated with embolization, but there's no emboli. I'm telling you, the stroke did not happen during that phase of the operation. It's something else that you got to look at. So you can take this and say if there is no embolization during cannulation, decannulation, whatever he's actually doing, it didn't happen then. Look at the part that's got a lot of embolization and figure, doesn't mean that's when it happened, but at least you start narrowing the operation down to a point that you can work with. And it's very important to device companies because they can, you know, put a branch thoracic endograft, single biggest limitation is going to be stroke. Some places run 20% stroke rate. You got to know when the stroke is actually happening, okay? And so that's the advantage of being able to monitor this real time. Now, we're going to talk about stroke. You and I will live in the world of stroke for the rest of our professional careers. It's what we're going to be judged on and what we're going to have to change. And so a lot of the criticism said it's too sensitive, show me stuff. Okay, now we move into the TAVR world. Okay, TAVR, if you do diffusion-weighted MRI imaging of the brain after a TAVR has been put in, 70 to 100% of them are going to have things in their head. And those things, what diffusion-weighted MRI it shows edema. Edema is because something has happened inside those blood vessels and damaged the blood vessels, okay? Most of those patients have no clinical sequelae that are identifiable. We have ignored this. It doesn't really matter. You know, TCD, too sensitive. MR, too sensitive, just ignore this. Well, the new classification system for stroke just came out, endorsed by this multidisciplinary group of people, including prominent cardiologists and surgeons, largely driven out of the TAVR world, which says type 1 stroke is clinical sequelae and imaging manifestations of a stroke. A type 2 stroke is an MRI positive scan, asymptomatic MRI. That patient, by definition, has had a stroke. If I image the patients you put on pump, 40% of them, if this is adopted, will have had a stroke.
Say that again?
Pardon?
So would you say that? Repeat that sentence.
if we accept this new classification system, which says that type 2 stroke equals cortical, I think cortical is the word they use, maybe cerebral necrosis, that is now defined as a type 2 stroke. Papers by a guy called Lansky.
Say 40% of the patients have that?
Yeah. You're much less than TAVR, and that's the good news. But you got a hell of a conversation with the patient who you're going to explain there's nearly half of you are about to have a stroke. But oh, by the way, it's the strokes that we don't really care about. They're not that important. But the TAVR guys are going to tell you everybody's going to have a stroke. So it is a game-changing assumption if that's the case. And the neurologists are now saying that diffusion-weighted MRI image equals neuronal necrosis, that you are killing brain cells, and that 1 cubic millimeter of that brain equals 80,000 dead neurons. And 4 million synapses, the connections between the different things, are affected by that. And that on average, if you do a TAVR, you have 7 cubic millimeters of dead brain from one episode. And so this is a fun, I was just blown away when I read this thing because, man, I live in the endograft world, and it's like, holy crap, I don't even know what it is that we're firing up there. And the neurologists will argue that right now, those clinical sequelae may not be obvious. This is cumulative. And over time, you must learn to prevent emboli that are causing cortical necrosis. So this is going to affect all of us that's in there. And
that stroke, is that being caused from those wires going up there in TAVR, or is that the one at the valve?
Good question. How are you going to figure that out? Can't do. So we're going to put the wire up, get an MR. Basically, put the valve in, get an MR. That's the problem. The problem is it's incompetent. That's why we are wedded with TCD. So on the one hand, I went, oh my Lord, this is going to affect my life. It's going to affect every device company. On the other hand, I go, this is going to validate TCD because it's the only way you're going to figure this out. And so if the paper we published was in thoracic endograft, and where we're doing bihemispheric monitoring of TCD, and you can see that it's the device deployment, it's the ballooning of the device that causes the embolization. And so that's why the question you're asking is exactly the one that's going to have to be addressed. But you can either go, this is the TAVR guy's big problem. They're going to fix it. You got to fix your problem. Because what this is going to drive, is driving actually, is a whole development of embolization protection devices. TAVR's not going to go away. But man, if they're going, imagine if you're a TAVR guy and you got to go consent a patient. We used to say there was a 4 or 5% risk of stroke. Now you're going to say, well, there's 4 or 5% risk of stroke, this kind of stroke, but type 2 stroke, it's nearly 100%. A patient's going to freak if you got to tell them something like that. And so, but I think what it's going to do is shine a spotlight on embolization. When embolization occurs, what the magnet, again, let's do the lawyer thing. Is no embolization better than embolization? Okay, this is the problem is nobody can argue that having holes in your head after this is a good thing. It's a bloody awful thing. The good news about TAVR is that by and large these patients feel better.
You got a new valve.
They got a new valve, you've kind of uncorked the damn outflow tract, so they feel better. So all of the cerebral stuff kind of gets, obfuscated a little bit in trying to figure it out. But this is going to say, this is embolization, this is dead brain. You guys have got a big problem. We got to figure out how we prevent this. And I think this comes back to our world, is how do we take the things that we're doing and not basically be big and fat and happy. We're going to have to figure out how we make this better. And I think you guys can potentially grasp this monitoring tool better than anybody else who's in that operating room, because this is what you do. And to start looking at cerebral perfusion, focus on that to start with, then you'll start figuring out the embolization. But that's a little more challenging.
What's the name of that paper y'all wrote?
Oh, it's just look up my name, and it's TCD monitoring of thoracic endograft, and it's in the Journal of Vascular Surgery.
So the limitation, my colleagues here, I think will all agree, is anesthesia. I think all of us like playing with toys. We like looking at pretty waveforms. We enjoy that kind of stuff. But trying to get the anesthesiologist to just simply step aside for a minute while we put it on
Yeah.
is tantamount to asking them to let us do something horrific to one of their family members. They take their little space very personal. I think all of us experience that. How do you see that being overcome? Because that seriously is our limiting factor.
Okay. So
Sorry.
I have a stroke.
He's an anesthetist.
I have a stroke. I'm post-op. And I'm sitting in the corner of the room. I'm not dead. I'm hemiplegic. And I'm going to say to you, when I see you, why'd you not do transcranial Doppler monitoring me? And you're going to tell me because you're afraid of the anesthesiologist. You're not going to say that because it's so bloody stupid. Because you can't say that. You can't say. No, I'm just let me play this out. Is that you're right? That's the harsh reality of what we live in on a daily basis. And the reason I'm putting it in the setting of being deposed is because you can't say those words because they're going to friggin' destroy you, under those circumstances. You're going to tell me that you recognize this is the best way of doing it, and that you're in an environment where you could have protected my patient, and you didn't do it because you're afraid of the anesthesiologist not giving you time to do it. You help me understand the logic in that, Joe. That's what he's going to say to you. And you can defend it. No, I'm not. Look, TCD is not in the here and now at the moment. I'm just saying that I fully deal with practical realities of trying to get people to do things on a daily basis. So we're trying, as you know, we're trying to build the case that this is a good thing to do. Having looked around the operating room, it's like, who's the best person to do this? I think you guys are probably the best people to do it. Now, there's this whole series, basically, of practical barriers in order to be able to do that, but this is what you do. And that's why I was sitting there playing with your dials and things last night so that I understand, what your capabilities and measurements actually are.
How much do they cost?
They're dirt cheap. These things are $40,000, $50,000, and there's a billing code associated with them.
Now, the anesthesiologist might like that
No.
if they're going to get paid
No.
for it. Now, that opens up some doors, okay, potentially, all right? Now, if they don't get paid enough, it's not
Yeah.
really business, because we know who's fat, in the room with the money, all right? It's always the ones who's not there or watching the Wall Street Journal. But it's not a matter of being afraid of them. I think it's a matter of they outrank us. That's just a harsh reality. They outrank us. And so, unless this is going to be studied and it becomes a standard of care, like having pulse oximetry. You wouldn't put somebody to sleep without pulse oximetry, would you? Absolutely not. So when that becomes the issue, when it becomes a standard of care, then it would be more widely accepted. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would dispute this is the right thing to do.
Sure.
I think
It's a journey.
Everyone in this room would like to do it on every case.
At the end of the day, Joe, I think it needs to come from the surgeons. When you look at STS, and we get all these scores, name less the anesthesiologist. I mean, he's not even on there. I mean, notice the perfusionist on there. It says Dr. Tom McGilvery, ABR, mortality, blood loss, stroke rate. So at the end of the day, the only person who's culpable for this in the eyes of the world is the surgeon. So it's going to have to come from them. And that's part basically of trying to persuade people, that this is a good thing to do and that it's practical. I mean, it's not, I can't just implement this tomorrow. And that's why we kind of walk through this. Is it good to know where your head is being perfused when you're on cardiopulmonary bypass? Hard to dispute. That's not a bad idea. Now, how do we get there?
Well, education's obviously one. I don't think you give a plug, but and then interdisciplinary meetings. I think you mentioned that earlier today. Of course, New Orleans conferences in Las Vegas, but bringing heart care teams together in meetings. We frequently see, in fact, this is somewhat of an anomaly, and it's not quite done, I think, the way we wanted. I think we do really good in New Orleans with that. But I think having heart care teams participate in joint conferences is much better than everyone living in their own silo. We do our own little perfusion thing, they do their surgical thing. They never really discuss what we do. We don't really understand what they do. We look, we look in the hole. We don't really know what the hell we're looking at. We look in the hole though. But and I think that that's part of the problem is that we don't talk to each other. Everybody talks amongst ourselves. That's what the paradigm has been historically.
It's called the other guy's toolkit.
the other guy's toolkit.
Yeah, we talk about pumps and pipes. I think it's a great venue to do that.
Yeah, look, I fundamentally think the answers to a lot of these issues already exist, but it's the other guy's toolkit. The optical scanning, spend all this time trying to figure out optical scanning, and then I walk into the operating room right next door to me with the chairman of neurosurgery. I say, I want to talk to you about optical scanning. He goes, well, that's what that is. It's under my nose. But I don't talk to the neurosurgeons. I don't look at the navigation tools that the neurosurgeons have got. And Pumps and Pipes is a meeting that we run here and with the oil and gas guys and now NASA. And so what does a drilling engineer and what does a CV surgeon have in common? One hell of a lot. We use imaging. We navigate hollow tubes to a target. We access a target. We deliver volume flow from point A to point B. They told me they're in what they call the flow assurance business. No, you're not. That's my job. I'm in the flow assurance business. That's what they call it. When the pressure drops, they put a pump in it. Those pumps fail. They have all these analytical tools. They try to figure out, why the pipes are sludging up, and they try to figure out ways to clean them. They try to figure out when the pipe is going to blow apart, and then they intervene, before they do that. And so there are a lot of tools that are used that are very similar. How do you join two tubes together? When I told them how we do it, they were like, they can believe it. It was so archaic. So what they got to do is be able to join, a 12-inch pipe together on the ocean floor with robots with 99.9% chance that it's sealed. What do we do? Toss in a few stitches, take the clamp off, go, oh shit, more stitches. A little bit of Teflon. These guys are like, you got to be kidding me. This is barbaric. You can't do that. When they see what happens in the shuttle when they don't get the sealing thing right, it's kind of catastrophic. So there's other things that we kind of explore. Robotics is kind of another example. Infection. When a pipeline blows up, it's infected. How in the devil's name can a steel pipeline get infected? Because what happens is that when you bend a tube, you get areas of low shear, as you know, and a flowing pipeline coming out of the ground, there's all this sediment and stuff, which is very field specific, and it builds up and it layers out in the low shear areas. So then you get steel, flowing oil and gas, stuff, and little microenvironments that are protected from the stuff where the bugs grow. And the bugs that grow in a pipeline produce sulfhydryl groups. Sulfhydryl groups converted into sulfuric acid, and sulfuric acid dissolves the steel of the pipeline. So infections, endoluminal infection, is a big problem. It is a $1 billion a year problem. That spacesuit that we showed you earlier was from an Italian astronaut. This whole thing is on the Pumps and Pipes website, actually. The most viewed thing ever when we broadcast this. His name was Luca Palmitano. Luca was here and was up in the imaging suite when we imaged the spacesuit. And so Luca was outside the space station. And they go out as a buddy system. Luca is on one end of the space station. I don't remember what his buddy's name was, but he's the other end of the space station. And all of this is being monitored at Mission Control down at Johnson Space Center. And so Luca's basically saying, hey, we're here with something inside my spacesuit. He says, there's something behind my neck. Well, that's a little freaky. And so, well, what do you mean? Can you explain? He said, yeah, there's something that are moving around inside my spacesuit. And they were like, okay, well, not sure exactly what that could be, but maybe you shouldn't have all these, the way they train these guys, they have this terminology. So abort means take your time and move back. Terminate means get your ass out of there, because you're in trouble. So they said, just abort this and head back. We'll alert your buddy. He's going to meet you at the hatch, and just head back to the hatch. And so Luca is, they have all these handrails. And he says, well, this is getting worse, and this is getting worse really fast. There's something inside my spacesuit. And I'm starting having trouble hearing you because they have the communication system probably sticks out of their ear. And then they go on the dark side of the earth, and it's so bloody pitch black. And he said, I don't know what this is, but this is a real problem. And of course, they're showing you, they're live, they're monitoring his heart rate and his respiration rate is now starting to go way, way up. I'm sure the guys in Mission Control are too. And he said, this is fluid. There's some fluid inside my spacesuit. And he said, I'm having trouble seeing because it's in front of my eyes. and I'm having trouble hearing. And he said, when I breathe in, it's starting to go in my mouth. I'm having trouble breathing. He said, well, we've seen something like this once before. There was a little bit of fluid inside a guy's, and this was a guy who was a Navy SEAL, and he said he ate it. Start eating it. So he's in there trying to swallow this stuff, you know, meanwhile drowning in space in the dark as the other guy kind of gets over there. And the other guy, and then all of a sudden they couldn't communicate with Luca because the comm system, and the guy, you know, says, look, I'm looking inside his helmet, it's full of fluid. And I can't see him, and this guy's dying. And they get him inside the damn hatch. All the other astronauts can't get to him at this point in time. And finally, they kind of decompress, they get him in there, they take his helmet off, and all this fluid vents out from inside the spacesuit. And he didn't die, they resuscitated him. Because the spacesuits have a heart and a vascular system. There's a pump and a circulation in these spacesuits. And they keep you warm or they cool you down. And there are filters in the spacesuit. And these spacesuits are very heavy. So they kind of look at two guys that are about the same size and say, you're going to be really good friends because you're both going to share this spacesuit. You don't come back in for bathroom breaks kind of when you're out there. So you got to be really good buddies, basically, because you're both using the spacesuit with a diaper. And so they only bring them down if there's a problem with them. So what had happened was the circuit had got infected with algae. The filters were blocked with algae. The circuit ruptured, and it vented all this coolant into his spacesuit, and damn near killed him. And so you've got the oil and gas guys who have a problem with infection in the pipeline. You've got NASA guys basically have a problem with infection that's kind of building up inside the circuit inside a spacesuit. We all have problems with infected devices. You get an infected valve, by and large, it's coming out. So what NASA was trying to do was to build microwave delivery systems, long, thin tubes that they can put down inside the circuit that they can sterilize these things in space. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you put a long, thin tube inside an aortic valve and sterilize it from the inside? Well, I'd like to be able to do that with dialysis access grafts. So that's the kind of thing that we do with these guys.
Heater
That we kind of
coolers?
look at. Yeah. Heater coolers, yeah. Believe me, that came up. Yeah, heater coolers. All right.
Very good.
I'll hang up and Zill's here. Thank you.